Well, hello everyone. I am so excited to be talking today to one of my new yet very dear friends, Shaunti Feldhahn, who is coming from live from Georgia, right, Shaunti?
Yes, Atlanta. Yep.
Well, hello in Atlanta, and I have a feeling your wonderful husband Jeff is not too far away. We had the fun. Shaunti was just talking to my husband Ron, and they were doing another interview for some other exciting things that are coming down the pike for Shaunti and Jeff. And we met actually about 2 months ago. We first met over a year ago at an event where I heard Shaunti speaking, and I was absolutely riveted by what she talked about, her heart, her obvious years of experience in the subject that we're going to talk about today, and just felt so drawn to her. We chatted after that, and then saw her again at another event and decided that time to really get serious. And Ron and I started discussing how might we bring Shaunti into our world. So that all came together at the very end of February, right before we all got hit with the corona crazy, right, Shaunti?
It's crazy. It's like you and I and Ron and Jeff were sitting having dinner at a restaurant in New York. And, we were speaking at your church and doing all that kind of stuff. And like 10 days later after that,
I know.
Suddenly we're all at home. Sorry, you can't go out. All businesses are shut down. 10 days later, we all know it was whiplash. It happened so fast.
Well, and one of the things, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today as part of our Mother's Day week series in particular,
Yes.
is that you were mentioning that night when we had dinner, and I'm going to start with that because you were telling us a story about how you really got started doing what you're doing in the midst of another kind of crazy crisis. And I would love for you to just start by sharing that story of what launched you in. You've got a background in Wall Street. You've got a lot of different diverse experiences in your career journey. But tell us about that moment when you realized that what you were working on was more than just a research project.
Are you talking about how I started writing, or are you talking about this research project that we just
Well,
got?
I want you to talk about this one too, but I really want to go back to that one because
Yeah.
one of the things that I talk a lot about especially in these Love Your Life videos and interviews that I do, is really how there are never any mistakes. And so often we look back and we can see that there's this kind of divine plan from God in all that we're doing career-wise. And one of the things that I love to talk about with my friends that are more similar to my age is to say, hey, don't get discouraged if things look like a jagged jigsaw puzzle right now, because it usually is a divine plan at work. And your first foray into doing what you're doing now really came out of a similar crisis.
Well, yeah, candidly, it came out of being fired. Because when Jeff and I were in New York, I was a Wall Street analyst. Jeff was a lawyer at a big law firm. And we had decided, it's a long story, but we had decided that I would take another type of job that would allow me to work from anywhere. And I was going to be running the division of this organization. And I thought it would be the career for the rest of my life. I was extremely emotionally invested in it. And it allowed us to leave New York. Not that there's anything wrong with New York. We love New York. I'm a total New Yorker at heart. But it wasn't sustainable in terms of the number of hours that we were having to work. And we wanted kids, and I wanted them to know what their dad looked like. So, so we ended up locating to Atlanta, and I started this division of this organization from Atlanta. And 3 months later, was called out to a board meeting and fired.
Wow.
And it was devastating. Absolutely devastating. Personally and professionally. And I will sort of have a little editorial comment here. I didn't realize how much pride I had until it was shattered.
Yes.
But I was very surprised with myself that it was hard to really pull myself out of that place. And it's there's a lot of people right now who are going through really hard things where they're just not sure how they're going to make it the next day, not just financially, but emotionally. And it was really interesting what God did at that moment, because I was basically sitting on the couch for 2 months watching movies and eating bonbons. That's kind of what I was like. I was so depressed. And And yet I had this weird feeling as I was praying about, Lord, what do you want me to do? I, one day in this time of prayer, I had this bizarre feeling that God was telling me to write a book on this particular topic. Whole nother story, but on this particular topic that I had known something about from my Wall Street days. And I thought that was nuts because I had never been a book person, never wanted to write a book. All I knew about publishing was that it was impossible to get published because I had friends who tried. And I dismissed it. I thought that was just crazy. That couldn't be from the Lord. And that day was the day I was doing Henry Blackaby's Experiencing God study, which is remarkable. And that day was the day in the study where Blackaby says, we so often limit God by not responding when he calls us to do something. Because we look at it and we think, I can't possibly accomplish this. And that's sometimes the whole point. Now, different people are in different places with their faith. I get that. I used to be as well. And yet just being really transparent, really honest, I really felt like this was something that I was kind of being pushed to do. And that I should take a step of faith and see what happened. And that it was a moment to go, okay, maybe that was from God. And that maybe this is something that would be beyond what I could ever have accomplished on my own. Especially since I couldn't have accomplished it on my own.
Right.
And I basically said that moment, I said, all right, Lord, I will do what I can do. I can physically pull out all this research on this other topic. I can start typing a book into my computer. I can do that part. But you're going to have to do the publishing thing because there is no way that I can accomplish that. And 2 days later, I just happened to be introduced to somebody who found out I was doing this. I didn't even want to talk about it because it sounded so stupid. I'm writing a book, And he found out I was doing this, and he just started laughing. He's like, you're not going to believe this. But just last week, I was sitting down with a major publisher listening to them tell me they really wanted to do a book on this exact topic. And if I happened to run across anyone writing a book like that, would I let them know?
Wow.
It was just this miraculous thing, and realizing, and it was a very long story, but it was a very time sensitive topic. It had to be done very quickly. If I had had my job, there is no way that I ever would have been able to do this. And it was me being fired from that job and having the freedom to take on this crazy thing I thought I was being called to do. And then completely unexpectedly, that book ended up becoming a major bestseller.
Wow.
And it really ended up changing some paradigm and some thinking and really being very life transforming for some people. And it wasn't me. I now know that it was very clear that was not me that did that.
That is so powerful. I love that. You even shared some details that I had not heard before. And what I love about that, a couple things come to my mind. One thing I always say is that a dream in motion attracts provision. And so often before we even put something in motion, we want the provision, right? We want to see, okay, if I do this, if I step into the deep, if I do that step of faith you talked about, here are the things that I promised. And yet that's what you did. You just put it in motion. Maybe it wasn't even your dream at that point. You were just following the nudge, which is the other thing I'm talking about lately is how does God speak to us? I often think it comes as a nudge, just a what if, maybe so. And certainly you were at a time when you were exploring possibilities. I think a lot of people right now are feeling like you described, our pride gets hurt. I've been laid off. I know that feeling. We can reason it away. We can call it COVID. We can say whatever else, but it is tough when we're thrust into a transition that we did not want or didn't expect. And yet here you are now, Shaunti, years later. How many books have you written?
I was just thinking that. I look behind me. That is, how many books is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 of 25 books.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And you never even said
20 years later. It's just, it messes with my mind to think about it. And then I remember that story. None of that would have happened. Those would not be sitting there if it hadn't been that A, I got fired from that job, and B, that I hadn't read that Blackaby devotional that day that was encouraging me to really not try to figure it out. It's what you were saying. Don't try to figure out how God is going to do this. If you really feel like you're being called to do something, what I felt was the touchstone then, and it was part of that devotional journey, and has been a touchstone for me ever since, is don't you figure out, oh, this is a good idea, and then ask God to bless it. Instead, figure out what you're being pulled to do. Where is God working? And go join him. And don't try to figure it out, how it's going to be accomplished. It's literally just go, okay, Lord, the next step. That's it. That next step. And then wait and watch and see if you see another step open up, and then take that step and wait and watch and see where God leads you. Because it is so, to me, the lesson of this whole thing is that he is looking for people who will be faithful to his calling. And if it is true that this life is not our own, and if it's true that we're called to be a good and faithful servant, then it's really just being willing to do as much as we can. I mean, we're not perfect. We're not going to always hear perfectly, but it's really truly being willing to take that step, as scary as it can sometimes be, especially in a moment like right now.
Oh, so true. And it strikes me that one of the biggest reasons, and this is a lead into your most recent book, which I want to talk about, I think one of our biggest roadblocks oftentimes is money. I mean, we think, okay, maybe I can't try something new because I've got to just simply pay the bills. Or we're afraid of the risky thing, letting go of certain things, the security we've known. There are probably people right now that are going to end up transferring to a new city, going into a new industry, trying a different type of job, maybe even taking what feels like either a lateral move or a step back professionally. And yet now you and I could say with confidence, don't be surprised if what you feel like is your step back is really your step up, because so often that's how it goes. But I know in particular, we have a lot of working moms that are going to be watching us today. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, you certainly are a working mom. You've been doing the bulk of your work as a researcher and a writer since, how old were your kids? Or did you have children when you started writing?
Actually, I didn't. At the beginning, we didn't have kids yet.
Okay.
And when my best-selling book came out, and the one that started traveling and speaking just like crazy, the For Women Only book that helps women understand men, my daughter was 4 and my son was 1. And so this is all they've known, is this crazy working mom. And traveling and all the stuff that comes along with having to juggle everything.
Well, and then I'm sure you and I both know this as working moms. You struggle with that feeling. I always compare it to kind of like getting a C in every class at times, where you kind of think, well, I can't be getting an A+ in momhood. I can't be getting it in being a wife and being a cook, and daughter and a sister and a working woman. And so often there's those struggles internally. And I don't know that necessarily means we're really getting a C, but oftentimes we feel that way. How have you done that? How have you coped with the absolute priority in your heart of being a mom and a wife, and yet also throwing yourself wholeheartely into your work?
Well, there's a couple of different things that, just being honest, one of the things that every woman has to come to terms with, and I'm speaking to all of you working moms out there especially, because candidly, the most important piece is to let go of something that's probably the most important to let go of and hardest to let go of, which is this concept that I should be able to have it all and do it all and be it all at the same time.
Yes.
And it is in there. It is like you said, you want an A in everything and you feel like you're getting a C in everything. And the key that I've seen, and it's actually, believe it or not, a Bible study that I ended up writing because this was a very personal project for me. The Bible study is called Find Balance because, that's what we need. But I realized, I like your grade analogy. Let me spin that out, because right now we're trying to do everything. And so we are probably, if we try to do everything, you are going to feel like you're getting a C in everything. Nobody's going to be completely happy with you. You're not going to be completely happy with yourself. If you're trying to do everything as a mom, everything as a wife, everything as a worker, you're taking on every project, you're accepting every, deal that they want to put you on. You're trying to be the mom in your, kids' room, you're the room mom. Back when we're allowed into schoolrooms again. You're volunteering at the women's ministry at your church. Like, you're doing everything. For me, I'm sandwich generation, caring for, parents and kids. And the reality is, if we're trying to do it all because we feel like we should, we're not going to do anything well. And so the key is to make choices. And this is hard because it kind of means you're going to have to be okay with not even being in the class. It's not that you're getting a C in everything. You're not even taking that class. Like, I am not taking the class that says I have to be the best cook in the world, or that my house has to be the neatest. I'm not even going to take the class, because if I tried, that would keep me from being a good mom. And so it's trying to get an A or a B in the things that we feel called to do the most, that are the key, and being okay with letting go of the other stuff.
So good. It's just so good. Well, and what strikes me in that too is even within that class, it's the fact that I very well may be on a professional call and get an interruption by my children.
Yeah.
Little kids who don't know better, they just like, hey, what's mom doing? I want to be a part of it.
Woohoo!
Fact, and everybody being patient enough to realize that you may have 3 or 4 kids that you're trying to put through school right now because you're in online school. You're sitting there trying to do your job. Some of us I know are dealing with disappointment because I have many friends that felt like they were on the brink of a breakthrough professionally. Like, they'd been working for a couple years on projects to get set up for what had been promised them. And now all those promises vanished like that. There's so many dimensions, Shaunti, that we are all dealing with. And I think you and I certainly have the advantage of living longer now and seeing that we are going to get through it, that people are going to make it, that they are going to get a bounce back. We're certainly going to get a comeback. God is the God of comeback. And you see that the longer you live. But let's talk a little bit and segue, if we can, just a little bit on your latest book. Talk to us about the book and how you feel like some of the concepts are really relevant right now for what people, families, couples, people that are managing their finances are going through right now.
Look, we didn't know when it's another miraculous story that God gave us this research project. This is our 10th big research project and 10th book that is sort of based on it. And it was on the topic of marriage and money and understanding sort of what's underneath our responses to money. And it's not about how to do a good budget, because there's plenty of stuff out there, and that's not my specialty anyway. It's really, how do you have a great relationship? How do you come together around money? How do you talk about it without defensiveness? And why do you get defensive in the first place, right? Like, it's all of that stuff that's really where life is lived. And once you get that stuff figured out, then the technical stuff is a lot easier. What we were nervous about doing, because this wasn't an area that Jeff and I were on the same page, we were nervous about it. And yet it was a miraculous story. God got us started. We had no idea that it would come out a week before a national emergency is declared.
Wow.
And suddenly there's millions of couples that are stuck at home and worrying about money. And all the stuff that's underneath the surface, that's now under pressure, and it's coming up in more intense ways. And we suddenly maybe are in a place where, like Jeff and I before the research project, kind of, when you're in more of a time of prosperity, it's easier to go, okay, you do your thing over here and I do my thing over here. And we just kind of we'll do our own thing. we can kind of get by with being your paycheck goes into your account and my paycheck goes into my account. And, we can't do that anymore. We have to actually be able to come together and talk about money.
It's true.
And so that's what this research project was about.
What did you, as you, and you have done research. In fact, I love the fact that you're not just an author, but you actually based your writings on the findings of your research, which I found to be so helpful. I mean, when you all came into New York and did our marriage and relationships seminar, really a relationship seminar, we had a lot of single people there as well. It's so riveting to sit and listen to you guys talk about your research, because now it's not just your ideas or your thinking, which are all very good, but it's really based on what you found to be true about couples and individuals in particular. When you wrote this book and you were putting together this research, can you give us kind of a flyover of anything in particular that you found that maybe was new to you? I mean, you've written so many books now, you've done a lot of research. Were there any kind of aha moments as you came through this research project?
You're talking about 100% of it actually was new. Because like I said, this was not an area that Jeff and I were just not on the same page in this at all. Which, by the way, if that's you listening to this, realize, you're not alone. I'm not alone. 77% of couples can't talk about money well. And
Wow.
So, yeah.
77%.
77%. And the 23% of you who can talk about money, we're all very jealous of you. I think that's you and Ron, Lynette. You talk about money a lot more easily. I think you guys did the assessment that we had.
Well, and we always say that we think we can talk about it just because we've lived a long time, at least in part, but
it is not correlated to age. No, it is not correlated to age. It is not correlated to how long you've been married or whatever.
Wow.
It is a completely different thing. See, I have to confess, people like you who can talk about money well without having to go through it,
Yeah.
You're mutants. We're jealous of you, but
Wow.
in all seriousness, the reality is that if you want to have that great relationship around money and to be able to talk about it, the very most bottom line thing that you've got to start with is to recognize that if you're having tension and friction and maybe not fighting, maybe avoiding, any of those things around money, it's not about the money. That's what's the issue. It turns out it's about this host of things under the surface. It's how money makes us feel and how it makes your spouse feel, and all these expectations and insecurities and beliefs about how money should work that are running under the surface. And that's what we were studying. And so that is the stuff. If you learn that stuff in yourself, it's so much easier to talk about it because you can explain, okay, here's why I'm feeling defensive right now, as opposed to just feeling defensive and not wanting to talk about it.
That's so good. Now, when you in your book then, as you're talking about this,
yeah,
are you helping people get more in tune or come to some new understandings about different ways people typically feel about money and some of the resulting behaviors that go with that?
Yeah, it was essentially this particular study. I think we ended up studying 1,800 people in our interviews and our surveys. We do these big nationally representative surveys. I think the number was somewhere around 1,800 were surveyed. And what we were trying to get at were, what were the patterns? What are the things that tend to be running underneath the surface in a certain percentage of people? And maybe some different patterns depending on who earns the income in the family, and trying to sort of get at all of that in order to have people be able to go through it and go, oh my gosh, this is what I'm feeling. We identified 5 of these different sort of areas that tend to be under the surface. And each one of them, we identified these different ways that it plays out. And so that you can go through it and go, that is me. And that's why that made me mad. And I wouldn't have been able to articulate that. And then the next one along, that's not as much me. And when you go through that process and you identify, wow, that really is me, or that's my spouse, suddenly it makes sense of this thing that used to be just this big, amorphous, frustrating, emotional, avoidance laden thing in your life. And it is life changing for your relationship. And
Well,
especially right now where we have to talk about it.
And you know what I get every single time I listen to you, Shaunti, and certainly as we dove in deeper during the relationship seminar, is that you get hope. You suddenly realize that you're not that unusual. First of all, it helps to feel a bit comforted by that. And then you also realize that no matter where you are right now, I mean, you could have the money thing could be the number one stressor in a home right now. There still is hope when we get equipped, we get informed, we get tools that we can change. I mean, my parents have been married over 60 years. And one of the things I love about their marriage is they're constantly, even still, they're both about to turn 83 this year. Even still, they're working through things as a couple and always on that path of let's do better. Let's try to get new skills. Let's try to understand one another more. That gives me great hope that it's never too late to change and to adapt and to grow. And I always get that when I listen to you talk about the books. It's really needed right now. I think people just need to be hopeful that it doesn't have to always be like this.
Well, and especially in this weird season in history that we're living in, I mean, there is a need for not just hope that we're going to get through this, but okay, while we're going through this, that God is going to do something in us, and that this is an opportunity to kind of get stronger and deal with things that we've maybe, like money, perfect example, we may not have had to deal with it before, and now we kind of have to. You know, we have to communicate. We have to become one in money, like we're supposed to be in everything else in marriage, for example. And that core, that muscle, that skill set, whatever analogy you want to use, that when we come through this time, we're going to be a whole lot stronger. And that to me is hopeful, that really, I think, is what God is doing in all of this.
That's so good. I so bear witness with that. And every week I wrote a blog a week ago on just how to be in the flow, because it's just demanding so much flexibility right now.
Yeah.
In leadership, you know, leading your team, leading your, you know, you and I as speakers, I mean, our speaking opportunities completely dry up overnight. And yet here we are today saying, okay, maybe we can do this differently. We wish we could be together in person, perhaps, or we wish that we could be out on stage talking about what we know. But now we're in our offices, and yet we're able to share, you know, what we know and things, the tools that we might otherwise deliver. You are, to me, the epitome of that kind of an innovator. And it really gives us tools. Your books give us tools to innovate ourselves. So I just want to thank you, Shaunti. I mean, you and I could keep talking for another 30, 40
I know. I could talk to you for hours.
I know. We're going to hang out together again soon. But thank you for this. And we will put in, I will make sure I add to the write-up on the video here, all the contact information of where people can find you. They can go to your website. They can get the book that they're looking for, any of your tools, any of your materials. Check into having you in as a speaker and as a guest researcher and a guest expert.
Thank you. Yeah.
But I just appreciate you so much. You're an inspiration.
Thanks, Lynette.
And
back at you, sister. Totally.
Well, I'm going to see you sooner than later. And thanks for being on with us. We really appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks so much.
And everyone else, stay hopeful. Don't lose that. We're taking away great nuggets from Shaunti today. Follow the nudge. Go after that dream you've been thinking about, even if you just carve out a little bit of time to start going after. And keep your hope alive. Keep talking. Keep diving in. Get smarter. Learn the skills. Learn the tools. You can do it. You may not get an A in every class right now. You may not even be able to take every class, but you're going to make it, and you're going to do great. We're going to get through this, and we're going to look back and be grateful for the lessons that we received. So we'll say bye for now. Thanks again, Shaunti. Always great to be with you.
Thank you.